Welcome to this special presentation on the democratization process in South Korea and popular movements. My name is Leighanne Yuh, and I am a professor of Korean history at Korea University. In 2007, the United Nations declared September 15th as the International Day of Democracy. And it encouraged its members to establish institutions that advocate for inclusiveness and for accountability, and to allow all people to have access to justice. This presentation will show that the Korean people have always fought for justice and held their governments accountable, even through dramatically different historical circumstances. And they have included all sorts of people in their movements. The beginning of democracy in South Korea is usually associated with the establishment of the Republic of Korea in 1948, and some may even attribute it to the United States importing democracy at this time. But this presentation will show that actually the Korean people have a very long history and tradition of popular movements and popular participation in the political process and in airing their grievances to the government. This goes back to Confucian ideology, where the idea is that the people are the foundation of the state and that rulers are accountable to their people, so that if they do not rule in an appropriate manner, then the people have the right to protest and to criticize the government. One example of this is in 1862 with the Jinju Uprising. The people of Jinju, together with just regular peasants and with local elites, they came together to protest the high taxes that were being imposed upon that area. And another example is the 1895 Dongwak Peasant Uprising, which was actually the largest peasant revolt in all of Korean history. And in this case, they were also holding their government accountable for the corruption that was being experienced at the time. Later in 1895, the Independence Club was formed, and this was actually the first formal attempt to educate the people about democracy and about democratic principles. Once we enter into the colonial era, what we saw in 1919 on March 1st was what is known as the March 1st Independence Movement. It included about 2 million Koreans in total, and this was a movement to protest the Japanese colonization of Korea. It included men, women, young, old, people from all over the country, Christians, Buddhists, and Confucians as well. And what is noteworthy about this is that it was a peaceful and nonviolent demonstration. On August 15, 1945, Korea was liberated from Japanese colonial rule. In 1948, Syngman Rhee was elected as the first president of the Republic of Korea. However, he kept extending his presidency, and 12 years later, in 1960, university students led a movement protesting this extension, and this culminated in the April 19th movement, and this eventually led to Syngman Rhee resigning. Shortly thereafter, Park Chung-hee staged a military coup d'etat, took over the government, and he extended his presidency until 1979 for 18 years. And during this time, there was increasing social discontent, which also culminated in 1979. In this revolt, people from Busan and Masan came together, and they protested against Park Chung-hee's authoritarian rule. In May of 1980, the people of Gwangju came together in order to protest Chun Doo-hwan's military dictatorship. And the whole city rose up in protest. And this is actually quite well documented through the film The Taxi Driver. The 2017 film, The Taxi Driver, is a story about a German journalist named Jürgen Hinzpeter and a Seoul taxi driver named Kim Sabok, who takes him down to Gwangju. And Hinzpeter was the only journalist to have filmed the Gwangju Uprising, and after his successful escape back to Germany, showed the footage to his supervisors, who then broadcast it worldwide. And it is because of this that the events that occurred in Gwangju and the people's participation and their demands for democracy were known to the world. Following in 1987, after Chun Doo-won announced Roh Tae-woo as his successor, the people of Korea again came together to protest and to demand for the establishment of democratic rule. And this resulted in massive protests throughout the country, particularly in Seoul. And as a result of this, democratic rule was restored, and we have seen this since the 1990s here in South Korea. In conclusion, I hope that this presentation has been able to show to you that the democratization process actually has a very long tradition and history here in Korea, not just since 1948, and that it is based on the average person participating and demanding for justice and holding their governments responsible.